Good afternoon everyone and welcome to our first council meeting of the new financial year 21-22. And to start our meeting, could I ask Councillor Ketu if you could please welcome us with a karakia. Thank you, Robert.
Kia ora tātou. Tino pai o tātou wā whakatā o tēnei marama. Nō rere tēnā koutou. E te atu o he kaharawa, kei te whakamoimiti mātou ki a koe tēnei rā. Nau mai hara mai kai waingari o tātou, ki te whakatū te hinengaro te tinana me te wairua o tātou. Anei rā, ngā kaupapa whakahira tēnei e pānei ki tō kaupapa o tātou. Nō reira e te atu, tēnei te mihi aroha ki a koe, tēnā tiangana, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Kia ora.
Good, Robert. Thank you very much. So welcome to council staff, press members of the public that have just arrived and all those that are listening and watching live stream. As I said, welcome to the first meeting for the new financial year. We have no apologies. We have no public participation. Any late items?
There are no late items.
No late items. Any declarations of interest? None, thank you. Could I just move to item 5, which is confirmation of the minutes of our meeting held on the 30th of June 2021. I'll move that these are a true and correct record. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Isaacs. Any items to be brought forward? Move that these are a true and correct record. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Announcements? Any announcements? None. Proceedings of committees. So 7.1, the proceedings of the Community Wellbeing Committee. 2.1, 2.2, could someone move and second those be received, please? Councillor K. Simmons, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mason. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Next are the proceedings of the Foxton Community Board, the 28th of June 2021. Can someone please move that these be received? Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And I would ask if the Deputy Chair of the Foxton Community Board would like to give her report at this stage, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, we talked about the Foxton Beach Reserves Plan. Possible development options were discussed at the July workshop using the $700,000 left from the Foxton Beach Reserves Plan, 10-year plan. The feeling was to spend the money in Holman Reserve to enhance the enjoyment of the area for both the children and adults. Different options were identified: a multi-use tennis court upgrade, twins at Flying Fox, walkway and adult fitness stations, barbecue facilities having shade sails and seating, and maybe a splash pad. Wetlands were not seen as a high priority without the outside funding sources. This is not to say that wetlands aren't important, but we prefer them not to be out of this particular parcel of funds. If they want to be out of the freeholding fund, it would be a different parcel of funds. The road safety around the park, likewise, is not part of the reserve fund, but we're keen to see safety measures put in place as soon as possible via the rolling budget. Also, we'd be willing to maybe look at the freeholding fund to help that as well. Foxton Swimming Pool User Group meeting was held last Wednesday. The pool is due to open 1st of September. Exercise programs were presented. The groups are looking forward to not having to travel down to Levin. Brent Harvey reported on what option 2.1 could look like as external funding becomes available. Council officers are currently working on applications for external funding from Eastern and Central Community Trust and the Lotteries community facilities. The Community Board, through Chloe, has provided a letter of support to go with these applications. And I've also asked the organisation as listed below in the report I gave you to do the same. So hopefully there's a lot of support that's going with these applications. Foxton Projects, the surf club is still progressing with its challenges. The Foxton Beach Wharf is completed and looks absolutely fabulous. The CCTV cameras at Foxton Beach. At this stage, only the surf club and the Little White Rabbit cameras are live. We have had a few events in Foxton. Mid-July, we had a successful Matariki Lights Over Foxton event. A laser show, food trucks, kites with Mavtex radio station broadcasting live outside Te Awahanui Stream, and a movie night at Mavtex, which was a galaxy themed in line with the Matariki. Arian reported that we had some 1,500 people coming through our building, so there must have been at least 2,000 or 3,000 out in the cultural park over that 3-hour period. HDC and FTDA also did a joint marketing of Foxton in the Sunday Star Times. It was headlined, Foxton, A Tale of Tahonga, Treasures and Fizz. Now, we've had a public consultation with regards to extending the boundaries of Foxton Community Board, and I'm using this sheet here with the yellow to talk to. Most residents, that is 123 out of 128, welcome the prospect of being included in within the boundary of the Community Board area. The comment was often, it's odd that we're not included already. They were delighted with being able to have a voice at election time. Now, there were 22 additional approvals, which I haven't included in the spreadsheet, because they were people in the households that said yes, they approved, but they didn't individually sign. So I just wanted to be very pure about this, and I didn't include it on the spreadsheet. I'd like to give a special thanks to Brent Russell. He was one non-community board member that helped us going down door to door in the Foxton Beach area. So if anyone's got any questions, I'll see what I can do about answering them.
Councillor Allen.
Just not so much a question as an observation, Mr Mayor, under the Holman Reserve update. Just to note that there are 5 priorities identified there, and to note further that neither Councillor Brannigan nor myself could be at the workshop. We have flagged since then that we would like a chance to discuss that more fully, particularly around the wetlands issue or the drainage issue. So this is not about any further actions at this stage, but just to note that we have requested a second workshop so that we can re-examine those priorities in terms of stagnation and so on over the summer period. And I just want to make that observation that it's still, as far as we would like it to be, an ongoing discussion. I don't know what the Councillor Brannigan wanted.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
And could I just request that all elected members are invited to that workshop, because wetlands for me seem like an important place to start as a baseline for moving forward around the environment. So, yeah.
Further to note, I have got a copy of all the signatures, and I've tabled that, and if you want to have the originals or have a file emailed to you, I'd be more than happy to do that. But I've just tabled these for the meantime.
Yeah, I'll just ask the CE to give some advice on receiving that document.
So I think that information can be tabled, but my view, it probably can't be used. I think it needs to be considered as part of the consultation, which is the next step.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Trish. Oh, sorry, did you have a question?
Not for Trish, just around the Foxton Community Board minutes.
Certainly, okay.
Just on page 15, under the Foxton East Drainage Scheme, and through you, Mr Chair, just checking with the CE whether or not they'd had that on-site discussion with Horizons Council and residents.
Not yet.
Okay.
The first step in the process is actually engagement with council.
Thank you, Trish. Appreciate the fact that you are here and presenting that report on behalf of the Foxton Community Board. So, moving to page number 19, the receipt of the minutes of the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 30th of June 2021. Could I move in a second that they be received? Councillor Isaacs, Councillor Bishop, all those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. Moving to 8.1 reports. I'll move the receipt of the mayoral report. Can someone second that, please? Councillor Allen, all those in favour? Against? Carried. There's nothing from my perspective to add to these. Is there anything that councillors wish to add on their own behalf? Councillor Jennings.
Just some questions, if you don't mind. Just a couple of the items in the list I was keen to just interrogate a little bit further. Well, not interrogate, question about. Yeah. You've got here on page 27 pre-audit catch-up. And I just was wondering if you could just outline what was involved in that meeting and what if any, messages were conveyed to the auditors.
So that was before the auditor was here present at the meeting where he gave his report in terms of the long-term plan. So he just gave me a heads up in terms of what he was going to speak about and what was coming up with that. So no different from the information that was presented at the full council meeting.
Just secondly, there's an item in here called funding workshop, and I was just wondering if you could clarify what that was.
So the community development team organise funders like Eastern Central, lotteries, to present to organisations and groups within the district, and they just asked me to say a few words to welcome them.
There's also just reference to a Levin landfill meeting in June. Are you able to just talk about what that was about?
It was a meeting around the PMG asking me to advocate on their behalf.
Okay, so is that different to the PMG meeting that you attended in July? I think there's a second meeting.
Oh, yes, I may have those confused actually. I need to go back to my calendar. I don't think the first one was the PMG, actually.
Yeah, so just to clarify on the list, I think the first one's listed as Levin landfill meeting. And I just wanted to understand who that was with, what the scope of it was, and then I think secondly under July, it's got the PMG. If you can't deal with it now, that's fine. Maybe take it offline.
Sorry, these, because they're not dated on my report, it's just... (28th of June). Oh, sorry. Yes, so that was a meeting that I held with the Chief Executive and the other member of the PMG from staff, just an update as to where they were at that stage with the PMG process.
Thank you. And then the last one I just wanted to touch on was the future of local government, and I want to thank you for going along to that. I think myself and some of my colleagues expressed some frustration to the organisers of that around not having a local meeting. But I just wondered if there were any sort of key headlines that that were useful to convey to this open meeting around where we're heading in that sort of work stream, I guess.
Sure. So the forum was more about the members of the future local government body understanding what they thought from elected members were the issues that they need to confront in terms of, so it was a workshop pretty much in terms of sitting around tables and discussing on pieces of paper in terms of some of the things that they needed to consider. The program for the future is that by the end of September, this group will present to the Minister an interim report, which will probably give some basis for how they will operate into the future. So their interim report is due end of September 21, and then there will be further engagement with both TAs, business, and all interested stakeholders.
Thank you.
I actually attended the Palmerston North one because there was a council meeting here which I didn't have to be at. But I think they made the comment that the notes from that meeting were going to be made available. So I'll just check, and if they are, we'll actually, I think we'll actually make sure that those are circulated. Both the Palmerston North one and the Wellington one.
Right, now that interrogation's over, we'll move on to the monitoring report on page 31. Could I have a mover and a second that report be received? Councillor Kay Simmons, Councillor Mitchell, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Any items that members wish to bring up? Councillor Kay Simmons.
On page 32, are we able to have a current status on the update for Douglas Street and Lincoln Place? Is anything available yet for those two?
Not that I'm aware of. Mr. Nelson's not here, but I'll see if I can actually get that information before the end of the meeting.
So I've got a couple, actually I've got a couple if that's all right. So page 39. Oh, sorry, no, sorry. I've just realised I want to calm down. Sorry, Wayne.
So moving to page 35, which is the Chief Executive's report. Could I have a mover and a second the report be received? Councillor Allen, Deputy Mayor Mason, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor Kay Simmons, did you have an item that you wish to bring to the attention? It does include the long-term plan monitoring report as well as the Chief Executive's report.
I just wanted to, it's not really a question, it's more around a comment on page 39, the monitoring report under the waste minimisation, food waste from landfills. And I just wanted to point out, because I thought it was really important that we at the table knew that the Shannon Primary School's a really shining example of putting this actually in place around keeping stuff out of the landfill, including their worm and food composting projects that they're doing, and they've started bokashi bins, which is for dairy and meat waste for their gardens, and I just thought that they needed a little bit of a shout out because they've been doing a great job, and we've entered them into the Keep New Zealand Beautiful Awards as a sustainable school. And I've got another one on page 39 around pedestrian safety. I'll just make sure I've got the right one here. The Salisbury Street, Queen Street investigation stuff that's happening. I just wanted to know if the corner of Bar Street through to the Bar Street lights was going to be part of that investigation past New World and the bus stop, only because it's high traffic. You've got 2 entries and exits for New World, the taxi stand, the buses. It's quite a high level traffic area, and I wondered if that was going to be part of that investigation. And if not, could it be added? I think it's James's, yeah.
if we can just note an action, I'll take that up with the writing agent.
Any other, Councillor Allen?
Page 42, item 21, Mr Mayor, could I just ask that the community board be included in that item around the signage at the beach? They may well already be included in the list of stakeholders, but if not, could I ask that they be included?
Duly noted.
Would I be allowed to make a comment on that? Just that the day of that proposed meeting is the day of the reopening of the Loop Park. It's just going to be a clash, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to be coped with.
Which meeting are we talking about?
Officers raised this matter with the resident stakeholders at the next, so it's the Manawatu Estuary Management meeting, which this will be raised at the signage. That's the same day as the reopening on the loop, which is the 4th of September, I think.
Third. Well, yeah, and the opening of the river loop is not a major sort of grand opening. It's only going to take half an hour to an hour at the most, I would think. Yeah. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, sorry, just on that same section there, 21 on page 42. I know probably just the wording was C, but the Progressive Association also put quite an extensive submission in the LTP for signage in that June program of works that we're all looking for. So I know it's probably just the wording on the thing. I just want to expand that as well to include them as well.
That will be noted as well. Councillor Tikapua.
Page 42, item number 23, under the heading Butterfly Pathway, that was the resolution of council, that we support in principle the establishment at Thompson House Remembrance Park, and then help clarify community support and consideration, and then a possible contribution in the future. But then above it, it talks about officers having discussions and consulting with us again, whether another site become appropriate. And one date is October, which is just a few months from now, and the next one is March next year. I just want to understand where the work above, like where that came out of, if the resolution is the one below stating where it was. Like there it is, and then now it's not, it's somewhere else maybe. Like how did that come about?
Look, as I understand how these items have been identified, is some of them are actions and some of them are resolutions of the councils, and they've all dropped out of the LTP process. What I'll undertake is to actually just check what was agreed or what was indicated in the officer's report and versus what was actually resolved by way of the resolution. And if there is a difference, I'm hoping that it's actually they're talking about location within the Thompson House Remembrance Park rather than another location, but I'll actually check on that.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Pardon me if this is noted in the report, I don't think it is. Can you let us know what's the frequency of receiving this monitoring report going forward? Quarterly, thank you.
Yes, noting that there are about 57 items on this monitoring report, so it will be a considerable piece of work every time that we do look at it. But also noting, I assume though, that the items that are completed will be taken off the report as they are completed. Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other items on that report? Moving on to elected members' remuneration and allowances, page 49. Could I first of all move that this report be received? Can I have a seconder? Councillor Brannigan, all those in favour? Thank you. Against? Carried. So obviously the Remuneration Authority has set out these new rates and also the allowance and recovery expenses policy. We are basically having to endorse this. We do not get the opportunity to say, yes, we agree, we want more, or no, we want less. We are, in principle, endorsing. The only changes that are from the 2019 policy are those key changes outlined in 3.13 on page 51. Which refers to some of the allowances regarding internet connection, mobile phones, the inclusion of a childcare allowance and the vehicle kilometre reimbursement, which is prescribed by the Inland Revenue Department anyway. So I am happy to move 2.3, that the Horowhenua District Council endorses the following remuneration rates for elected members for 2021-22 to apply from 1 July 21, and 2.4 that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the elected members' allowances and recovery of expenses policy 2021. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor Mason, thank you. Any debate or discussion? Councillor Kay Simmons.
So do we, because I missed one of the briefings, around the childcare allowance on page 50, just to understand that the way I read it is that it refers to 6,000 per annum per child, and that I'm assuming it's funded through rates. And I also saw that it was about basically encouraging, or maybe being an incentive to get more diverse people for candidates for the election. And I just wondered where everyone sat with that, because I don't support it. And one of the reasons I don't support it is that when you look at the average weekly earnings full-time at $1,300 and the average weekly part-time wage of $440, and as an elected member, considered, we're part-time, I'm on about $620 a fortnight, and I just don't see where offering a subsidy of that kind of money for childcare and what we do for a job. I mean, I don't think they get that offered anywhere else. For other organisations, and that I just wanted to make sure that my feeling was felt at the table on that. So yeah, I just wanted to put it out there that I don't support that part, and I'd like it recorded as such, please.
Councillor Allen.
Look, I offer a different viewpoint. I think it's about what we feel is right for our team and how governance can work best for the community. What other organisations do is their choice. I do not want to see any impediment to a full range of members of the public feeling they can stand for council. And that's about often looking after the particular needs that those people bring with them. So to not do this would be of its very nature to disadvantage a certain section of the community. So to me it's about equity, it's about making sure that everyone feels that they can stand for this position and that they won't be disadvantaged by unique circumstances which could be seen as an impediment.
Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, look, I'd like to echo the sentiments of Councillor Allen. As one of two elected members around the table at the moment with young children who would potentially need childcare, I mean, I can say with conviction that this is not the type of allowance that I would personally apply for, and certainly have no intention of doing so if it is brought in. But I think it's about the signal that it sends by including it in a policy, again, that we are encouraging and we want to remove though any barriers or perceived barriers to younger people standing for election to this council. So for that reason, I'll be supporting the resolution as it is, which includes the policy with the childcare allowance contained within it.
And thank you, Mayor Burney. I will speak in support of it. I understand and Councillor Kay Simmons' position, but I think being elected member is certainly a very diverse role. It's a very flexible role. It requires flexibility and the ability to be places at short notice or in evenings and weekends. And I think about some situations where it would disincentivise people, particularly if one of the parenting partners was in a shift work position and people needed childcare in the evenings when childcare centres aren't open. There are a whole range of things. But mainly, as I understand it, this is driven by the young elected members of council across New Zealand. And it is about removing barriers to having a more diverse representation for our communities, and after all, that's what we are about. So I cannot see this being abused. I see this as being one small token of encouraging people to be at the table and to actually put their hand up to be elected. So for that reason, I do support the inclusion of it, understanding that there will be potentially a small cost impact to council, but I think it's one that we would be on the better side of the ledger of.
Councillor Kay Simmons.
Look, I absolutely agree with what you've all stated, and I do agree with that wholeheartedly. But the thing is that it's the ratepayer once again are going to have to pay for that, and I just don't think that's fair. So that's just what I wanted to make clear. You know, we've set the rates recently. We debated that at length, and now we've got another little piece of legislation to add into allowances where we're going to be asking them for more money. So that's just my view.
Just to clarify for you, Councillor Kay Simmons, that this does not mean $6,000 for each child, or it is $6,000 per elected member. So that's the maximum that elected member can claim in terms of child allowance.
Sorry, that's not what it says. It states $6,000 per annum per child.
Council will pay a childcare allowance of up to $6,000 per annum to an eligible member as a contribution towards expenses incurred while the member is engaged in local authority business. So, page 59. So that's the commentary around the report. The actual Remuneration Authority policy is set out in pages 53 to 59. Okay? Sorry.
It's already been mentioned that it was the young elected members of local government New Zealand that advocated for this particular policy to be introduced. And it's not that it's been introduced this year, it's been around for a couple of years, and councils, each individual council can choose to adopt it or not. Now, the reason why young elected members advocated for it is because last term they identified, 78 councils in the country average 10 members per council, so that's well over 800 elected members in the country, and young people being under the age of 40, consider that young or not, I probably think it's old, but under the age of 40 only made up 6% of that 800, 900 elected membership, and that is very small. And so we did some work around identifying the barriers, why aren't young people standing? And this was one of the reasons, because I thought, well, I can't because I've got a couple of young ones, and So they put this forward, it went through remit, the process, and it's come this far. Now, personally, I have no intention of applying for this because if I'm not looking after my baby, it's my partner and maybe my parents. But, just like any other allowance or expenditure you can claim, it requires invoice. So there's just no way. In my situation, or probably Sam's too. So, but it's for those who genuinely need it. And I'm pretty sure any claims end up in our annual report. So, public, if you're really that interested on who's getting all the claims, just look there, and if you're not happy with it, don't vote them in next time. There you go.
So, Councillor K. Simmons is actually correct. It's actually per child. It's not per member. So the wording on page 51, bullet point 3, is the correct wording out of the determination that's come from the electoral authority. Whatever that thing is called. Remuneration authority. So that on that basis, the wording in the policy needs to be corrected. So it's actually not per $6,000 per annum to an eligible member. We will actually have to correct that wording to say that it's $6,000 per child.
Can I just clarify that? I would imagine that the determination sets the maximum parameters, right? So therefore we could, as a council, adopt a lesser allowance or put some criteria around it in our own policy. So I just wanted to test that as a principle that we could retain the wording that we have in our policy because it is less, it's less scope than the maximum confines of the determination.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Just for clarity, it does spell out that the elected member, it has to be for the purposes of the elected member undertaking council business. That's correct? And so therefore, if you did have 2 children, it stands to reason that if you were at a meeting, you may need to pay individually for those children in a childcare setting, or alternately, if you had a minder coming to your home who was going to invoice you, you might only pay one amount for 2 children. But it does allow for a family-friendly, if you like, approach to it. But it is a definite amount, and the person does have to be able to evidence that they are attending to elected member business, is my interpretation of what is before us.
So registered daycare services is what it was referring to
Mm.
in that, not just anybody who's and look, hypothetically you could look at currently we have just putting it out there if we want to work in numbers, if under 14-year-olds we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 under 14-year-olds, that could be equivalent to $48,000 if everyone and Todd. So 9, if everyone chose to do, I mean that's my point. It could be quite an expense to the ratepayer, and I don't think everyone possibly read it in the context that it's being portrayed as.
Okay, so can I just provide some guidance, because I think Councillor Jennings is actually correct. The elected members' the Remuneration Authority's information is a guide. There's maximum levels that you actually can go to. We actually have to get their approval, certainly on the remuneration to councillors and that. But as far as the policy is concerned, that's actually an internal policy. But what we can't do is breach the guidelines that have actually been set by the Remuneration Authority. So my advice at the moment would be to say that the policy wording could actually stay as it is, and what that's indicating is it's $6,000 per member rather than per child. If I'm wrong, we can actually correct it at the next meeting. But I'm pretty sure that it would be okay to keep status quo as a policy for this council.
Is everyone comfortable with that? So everyone's still comfortable in terms of putting 2.3 and 2.4 together, or would that like to be separated out? Councillor Bush.
Can I just ask from the member Tikapua, the study that was, I'm assuming the study that was done by the young electeds throughout the country, have they brought back evidence to say that $6,000 is going to be the game changer for, because that's what it's got down to, that you've got the theory sitting up here, but I imagine somewhere someone has landed and said, if I was to have that much support, it may encourage me to engage in this role for our community. Is that actually come through from a study, or is this just a bit of a thumbs up?
That's what I'm talking about.
So young elected members' numbers has now increased from 6% to 11%. In terms of those under the age of 40 stood in this and were successful. Look, in all honesty, I don't think $6,000 is an attraction piece, or, you know, the integrity of a person. They're here to stand for a reason, not because they can get $6,000 more. And like I said earlier, you've got a criteria, claims process, you've got to produce invoicing, receipts, what have you, and then it goes in our annual report. And if the public can see someone's claiming, oh look, $12,000 for those two kids, and they're not happy about it, don't vote them back in. Simple as that. Make your choice in that way.
I suppose it's about providing option, and members have the ability to claim for other expenses like petrol and other things that they do and participating in there. Some do, some don't. And so this is just giving those younger members with young children and their families to be able to claim some of that expense if they do have it and wish to. I see it no different from people claiming for mileage coming from different parts of the district, or any of the other allowances that we get. So the Chief Executive has given advice that at this stage the policy will remain the same, and if there is seen to be at odds with the Remuneration Authority, we'll bring it back to the table. Understood? Okay, so I have moved 2.3, 2.4, and I have a seconder. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Allen.
I just wondered, Mr Mayor, if the two recommendations should be separate, because there's controversy over the second one, so I suggest that we should.
I did ask that question a minute ago, and right, okay. So in that case, moving 2.3, which is the remuneration rate for elected members for the 2021-22 year to apply from 1 July 21. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now 2.4, the Horowhenua District Council adopts the elected members' allowances and recovery of expenses policy. Councillor Mason, are you happy to continue to second that motion? Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Against? We have dissenting for two. So, like those noted. Councillor Bishop, Councillor Kay Simmons voted against. It's just as well my grandchildren live in Sydney, otherwise. And I've done my babysitting duties today as well. Yeah. So moving to the representation review, adoption of an initial proposal, and could I welcome Daryl Griffin to the table, our consultant on this issue, and Daryl's got a few words of introduction to make, and then we'll discuss. And Sue's going to shift seats as well to support Daryl. Welcome, Daryl.
Mayor and councillors.
Yep.
Just while Sue's getting set up, I'll just talk a little bit about the report that's on the agenda. I work remotely online, and one of the things that has happened is I sent some changes through on a draft that when they arrived within, they didn't show at the receiving end the changes that had been made. So there's a couple of things in the report that I need to correct for you. We will correct the online version and make sure that the report that we're considering today is in fact based on correct information. The council was made well aware of the main issue, and that is that with the introduction of Maori Ward, there is no longer any provision for the council to be able to be elected at large. Unfortunately, the report still has reference to at-large elections, so those references will be removed from the final document. It was made very clear at the workshop, and councillors understood that, but we just want to make sure that the documentation that you're considering is in fact correct. The second issue is in terms of the fair representation. There is a reference in the report under section 5.41 to voting age population. The Act talks about population, and it's an assumption that the voting age population is in the same proportion to the total population. So in fact, we should only be referring to population. It's confusing if we say electoral populations or other populations, that no matter how they're described, the Act talks about population, total population. So we're talking about plus or minus 10% based on the population of those wards. So any questions that I can take about that? And again, I apologise. It's one of those things that happens, and we didn't get it picked up before we got the report to the online and out to councillors. I guess the easiest way, Mr. Mayor, might be if I just run through the options. The report is consistent, apart from those other issues, those errors, it's consistent with the discussion documents that the council has had, and it's consistent with the information that we discussed at the workshop.
Sorry, Daryl, can I just, first of all, before you start that, just move receipt of the report first, and Councillor Jennings, seconded by Councillor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Sorry, thank you. Just get that on the table. So now, yeah, please carry on.
So I think that the easiest way to assist the council through this process will be to run through the options that we have on the table. Now, these are options that are the preferred options that the council chose from a raft of options that were presented in the discussion documents. There are options based around 10 general councillors and 2 Maori councillors that include some shifting of mesh blocks in 3 places in Horowhenua, and they are residential development to the east of Levin being shifted from Waipehu Ward into the Levin Ward, residential development to the south of Levin being shifted from Waipehu Ward into the Levin Ward, and a readjustment of a change that was made in 2012 around with the lots, the mesh blocks to the south of the Manawatu River being moved back into the Kirikiri Ward. Is that right? Did I get that right? moving from the Kerikeri ward back into the Waipahu ward. Right, so that the boundary now becomes the Manawatu River. There are also options relating to the second option that we considered at the workshop, where the numbers of councillors were reduced from 10 and 2 to 9 and 1 and 8 and 1, again with some changes to the mesh blocks. And there's been a further request from a councillor for an adjustment to one of those preferred options. That is where we made an assumption, I think, that the original request was for both the sections to the south and the east of Levin to be moved, whereas the councillor request was only for those in the east and not the ones in the south. So we've produced a second, an option G2G, which was circulated earlier today. So if I just run quickly through the options, the first option is we've tried to retain the numbers the same as they were during the discussion documents to reduce any confusion. So the first one is option 1B, where we have a total of 10 general and 2 Māori for a total council of 12 plus the mayor, it's 13. And in that option, the change is to move the urban development to the east of Levin into Levin. So that's the status quo plus the Māori wards, with the adjustment for that development, urban development on the eastern edge of Levin to move into Levin. That produces an option where it is there are 2 wards non-compliant. Kerikeri at minus 11.67 is slightly overrepresented, and Waipahu at 11.28, which is slightly underrepresented. Option 1C is simply that option that I've just described, with Kerikeri and Miranui wards combined into a single ward with 3 councillors. Option 1F is for the same numbers of councillors, 10 general and 2 Māori, with a 4 ward structure. That's Kerikeri and Miranui retaining separate status, separate wards. And this one includes the development to the east of Levin and the development to the south of Levin, which has considerable urbanisation, to be included into the Levin ward. That moves a total of around 650 people from Waipahu into Levin. That option has Kerikeri ward as the only ward that is outside the plus or minus 10%, and that is only at minus 11.67. And again, that is slightly overrepresented. We then move to option 2, which the council wanted to explore increasing the general ward councillors by 1 from 8 to 9. This option was explored further, retaining 1 Māori ward councillor for a total of 10. There is a further option if you choose to have 9 general ward councillors. You could also have 2 Māori ward councillors, because that's just simply the way the numbers work. Right, so 9 plus 1 is 10, so the entitlement, if it's 9 plus 1, is 1 Māori ward councillor. 9 plus 2 is 11, and that is 11 councillors elected by wards, which entitles Horowhenua to 2 Māori ward councillors. All of the options that we've considered suggest a single Māori ward, but that's another decision you have to make as part of your representation review as to whether there are 1 or 2 wards where you have 2 members. Option 2F is our interpretation of the councillor request for the movement of population from the east and the south of Levin into the Levin ward, with a further change around the Manawatu River. We have that option. That option produces, with 8 general ward councillors and 1 Maori ward councillor, is outside the preferred number of councillors that was generally preferred at the workshop, but it produces a fully compliant option with the fairness rule. All of the wards are within the plus or minus 10%. The last option is the one that was circulated today, which is the correct option requested by the councillor. That is just the eastern development moving into the Levin ward, with an adjustment around the Manawatu River between Kirikiri and Waiupehu. That also produces a fully compliant option. The other point that I would draw attention to councillors to is that when you have a 10+2 number of councillors, there are 5 councillors elected from the urban development or urban ward of Levin, and 5 councillors elected from the balance of Horowhenua, which could be largely regarded as rural with some urban townships. So that gives you a 5+5. Some of those 5 in the rural area may well come from urban sectors like Foxton and Shannon, but they are service centres for the rural part of Horowhenua. That also applies the same comment of 5+5, providing some sort of equity balance, also applies in the two options for 8+1, because it's 4 councillors in the Levin ward and 4 from the balance. And I guess I'm mentioning that because part of some of your argument might be about where people come from, but it is also factual that a councillor does not need to reside, be domiciled in the ward in which they stand. So you could have people from the urban area elected in a rural ward. At the end of the day, it's only for electoral purposes. The division is only for electoral purposes, and representation aspect, but around the table you all commit to making decisions in the best interests of Horowhenua as a whole. Having gone through those options, it's not for me to tell you how you might work, but it would be helpful if there was one option that provided a basis for which to discuss how you want to proceed, and that it centres the debate, I guess, on the issues that are relevant to your discussion. We have to come up with one single option, regardless of how you present the fact that you've considered, had a fairly robust process and considered a number of options to reach that conclusion. And again, just to touch on the process, once you've decided, we produce an initial proposal document, we publicly advertise. The option, the initial proposal, is open for submissions from the community, and the community, then you have to listen to what the community has to say. You have to go through a formal hearings process. You reach then a final determination, which becomes a final proposal, which then goes out for public consumption again. So there's 2 bites of the cherry for the community to pursue their ideas if the council's decisions or determinations don't match theirs. Then the option at that stage is for appeals or objections to be lodged, which are then referred to the Local Government Commission. If any of the options that you determine in the final proposal have a ward that exceeds the plus or minus 10% margin, you must refer it to the Local Government Commission as if it was an objection, and the Commission will then deal with the matter and make a determination.
So thanks, Daryl. First of all, though, before we start moving into that, are there any questions or clarifications needed from Daryl? Councillor Bruni.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Thanks for your reports. It's been very helpful. In terms of the deviation, I know you've talked about the idea under 10% and when our Kiri is slightly over, and a lot of these models there are discrepancies. For me, I think my feelings pain. I think we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, quite frankly, because there's been no moving criteria apart from the percentage deviation or deviation percentage, which I think is wrong given the new dynamics of what we're dealing with. My question is there any movement around the country in terms of challenging that percentage deviation? I know we're talking about potentially 15% might be acceptable. Is there any evidence around where some councils are perhaps pushing the boundaries on that?
Without a doubt, I don't represent every local authority or I'm not assisting every local authority that is undertaking a review, but of the 15 or so that I'm directly involved with, most will have proposals before them that they're currently considering that are outside the plus or minus 10%, and it's largely because like Horowhenua, they may well have had a ward that was outside the plus or minus 10% to start with from the last review, and with the introduction of Maori wards, which most of the clients that I'm assisting have introduced Maori wards, the Maori population in the community is distributed in different proportions to the general population, and it affects the numbers as they are at the present time. So where councils are arguing that they've done the communities of interest thing several times, it's still pretty accurate. The electoral system is well understood by our community, and we think we've got the numbers about right to have around the table. Then there are going to be a number of referrals to the Local Government Commission. I've also been kept in touch with the Local Government Commission through the process, and while there are grounds for exemptions, the three grounds for exemptions are generally one of isolation or island communities. I don't think that applies in Horowhenua's case, so I won't go there. The other opportunities for support for a council decision where the movement is outside, the deviation is outside the plus or minus 10%, is generally around where communities of interest are either being divided in order to make the numbers work, or where they're being amalgamated where there isn't a community of interest that is clearly distinct and identifiable, and just simply to make the fairness aspect work. It may well be that a number of because of the benefits that are being provided by the introduction of Maori wards and the benefit in that way of effective representation for other parts of the community, then it may well be that there would be more sympathy for approvals that are outside the plus or minus 10%. I can't judge how far the Commission might go, and I would suggest that they will weigh each argument on its merits. If you've got a good story to tell, then the chances of getting the support especially if your community supports the option that you come out with, is likely to be supported by the Commission as well. But if it goes too far, I don't know where too far is, whether it's 15% or 20%, wherever that line is drawn, without the isolation factors, then it's a judgment call that you have to make.
Councillor Tukapua.
So we have before us these 5 options, actually probably a 6th one with the 2G. But if we were to, or if possible, slight adjustment of a ward boundaries, can that still happen now, or it's past its?
It could happen today,
Okay.
but we've got some GIS support with us, but we.
Is now the time to ask exactly, or no? I'll wait for the. Okay, so Queen Street, Big Street, in one of the options it proposes to go right to the end of Queen Street East, but I'm thinking of Queen Street West, and it stops part way down that street. For example, 179, who I know is in the Waipihu ward, which they think is strange because they're urban in their own eyes and got town supply, etc. And next to them is about to be another subdivision of a number of homes, GJ Gardner, I think they've got it. And then you go along a bit for more houses, and then there's the dog park, which we all know. So I'm wondering, can we just extend Queen Street to actually complete and include all those houses on that street as live-in ward tonight, maybe, if I've got support?
What we have to do is we have to move whole mesh blocks. We can't move parts. We have to put, and the mesh blocks are set by the government or through government sources. So if a mesh block is largely made up of rural land with a fringe of some urbanisation on the edge of it, then you're moving quite a large area for sometimes a very small number of people, and that small number of people doesn't actually alter your percentages very much at all. So yeah, the changes can be made, but you've got to bear in mind that you're making the change for other reasons than just simply making the maths work. There's got to be good reason around communities of interest and effective representation. There should be. I'm saying there should be. I'm not saying there got to be. There should be good cause.
Councillor Bishop.
Thank you. Given the clear steer around that's coming through from Wellington around the 3 waters, is there a trend with the councils that you're working with developing where less representation is seen to be the way forward rather than more?
That's a tricky one, Councillor. So far, of all the authorities I'm working with, we've only got 2 of them that have been as far advanced as Horowhenua is. So trends are difficult to pick, but there are options for a trend to develop. But it's both ways. Some councils are looking to simply increase to take into account and allow for effective representation of the Maori community. So they're looking at much like one of the options you've got of as close as possible to the status quo plus. Other councils are taking into account the potential for changes in local government, or considering changes, but they're also tempering that with the fact that they will be in a position to carry out another representation review if necessary in 3 years' time, and if changes occur and it makes sense to review their representation arrangements, they'll do it at that time rather than second guess what might be going to happen at this stage. So trends, no, I can't indicate a clear trend at this stage.
Councillor Jennings.
Two questions for you, Darryl. First, I just want to clarify, just so that the public and people watching the live stream, the hundreds of them that are doing so, will just understand that the negative deviation in an option means that a ward is overrepresented,
Correct.
and then a positive number means that it's underrepresented. The second question I had was around what do we do, or can we do anything about where we know there is a mesh block that has a population number that we know is wrong? And actually, I should take a step back. I'm going to ask about a specific mesh block that potentially involves a particular councillor, Councillor Bishop. So I just wanted to forewarn you that I'm going to be asking about a question involving the mesh block involving Speldhurst, because I think it's a really good example of where the numbers that we're having to use and we're required to use appears to be out of step with reality. And so we'll take the Speldhurst mesh block, which includes so south of Kimberley Road and north of McClevey Road, obviously bounded by Arapaipai and State Highway 1. The mesh block records that, so on the numbers that we're using, a population of 216 people in the general electorate and the Māori electoral population of 12. And from conversations I've had with Councillor Bishop and other public material around obviously the speed of development in terms of the Speldhurst alone, we know that, for example, the Speldhurst population's in the region of 400 to 500 people alone, let alone the properties that then bound that Speldhurst development. So the question I have is, clearly we've got a mesh block where there is potentially a huge disparity between the numbers that we're using here and what the reality is. And so how do we deal with that in terms of the current process that we're dealing with? Does it mean that we should be, for example, ensuring that there is a negative deviation for the Waipehu ward to essentially take account of that or factor that in?
There's two questions in that really. One is, and I'll answer the last one first. The Local Government Commission has said that it can only take the statistics provided by Statistics New Zealand. That's what the legislation says, so it cannot second guess development or what might happen in the future. It can't do that. The issue that you have initially is what you consider to be a discrepancy between Statistics New Zealand figures and the numbers that you consider are actually there on the ground. You can have a conversation with Statistics New Zealand, and that can be through your GIS people or the Chief Executive, where you can request them to review that. When we come up with a proposal, we have to get the government statistician to issue a certification that the population figures we're using are correct. So there's and it's we've got to use the numbers that they come up with. So it's only that conversation with the Statistics New Zealand that will resolve the issue that you're raising. And that can happen between the initial proposal and the final proposal. Stats New Zealand have been quite receptive and quite responsive in terms of getting answers back to us fairly quickly. So, but they've got formulas that they work with,
Yes, part of the answers created a question for me, if you don't mind. Like when we perhaps doubt the accuracy of Statistics New Zealand's figures, are we allowed to base our rationale around our own forecast assumptions in the LTP? Those, no, you've got to listen to these ones. Oh, yeah.
what we did last time, if you so those councillors who were present when we did the review in 2018, we argued that there would be some growth in, I think it was the Muranui ward, that would account for some of the discrepancy over time. And the local government commission said they can't take that into account. They accepted the council's discussion as part of the weighting that they gave and approved the outside the plus or minus 10%. And from the homework that they did, they sort of indicated in their decision that the council was its trends were pretty right. The movement was happening, but they did say that they cannot take those growth strategy predictions into account. They have to use we have to use the stats that as they exist at the present time. But clearly, it's you're wanting some longevity to some of the decisions that you make. You don't really want to be addressing this every 3 years. If you can get to 6 years, it's means you don't have to go through the process again so quickly.
Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, look, sorry, I did just want to clarify because I wasn't particularly clear that I wasn't using just this one BESH block to say that it's wrong. I'm saying that obviously our growth patterns, will affect them. There'll be slight deviations right across the mesh blocks. It was just I wanted to use this mesh block to just sort of highlight where it was. I perceived it was pronounced. So I just wanted to clarify that for you and for the table.
Okay, so I guess that overall generic response is that the council will have those will know what the growth is doing to the representation arrangements, and it does have the ability under the legislation to review it again in 3 years' time if it thinks that the representation gets out of kilter.
Councillor.
Just one last from me, Daryl. Sorry, Daryl. I remember, I think it was the last representation review, we made some adjustments where Kiri came south of the river. Was it the last review? I think it was. The one before. So, was it no change in the last review, but a change in the previous? How you say you don't want to be doing changes, because I can imagine there'll be constituents out there who don't want to. Every elections feel like they're in a different ward and chopping changes. So we want to sort of try our best to try and future-proof this. Have we been fairly stable in our decision making in the past few reviews that haven't caused such angst?
My understanding that the change occurred in 2012, and it was a change that was made by the local government commission after appeals to try and get the plus or minus 10% closer. And back in 2012, there was less latitude, less flexibility around the plus or minus 10% than there is at the moment. So I think it was 2012, and I'm pretty certain it was the local government commission that made the change. And what is proposed in one of these options is to shift that back to where it was.
Oh,
Yes,
my last question's for Sue, maybe. We had a jam-packed gallery when we had the this whole debate around establishing a Māori ward to start with. I just wondered, those submitters or speakers, were they informed about this next step and I guess us considering 5 options tonight, and if so, did any of them respond? Is that for later?
To answer your question, iwi were informed about the public workshop that took place on the 7th of July, but they weren't informed about this paper going to council tonight. The Mayor sent iwi an email regarding naming the Māori ward, but as yet we haven't received a response.
Yeah, slight correction. I actually circulated this to one of the iwi groups last Tuesday, so before the paper was actually finalised. So they were aware of the paper that was actually coming to council
But you're right, they will have full opportunity to be able to be involved in the consultation period over the next month.
I was thinking more the submitters or speakers of the night rather than groups at large. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure we can contact them and let them know. Any further questions for Darryl? Thanks, Darryl. Okay, for now, I'm sure we will probably need your expertise a bit later on in the conversation anyway. So the intention is, obviously, we have a number of resolutions and recommendations to discuss in front of us. So it is my intention to take them one by one rather than do them in block, because they do impact further down if we decide one way or the other. So the first one is 3.3a, where we talk about the number of general ward councillors, the number of wards, and the number of Maori ward councillors, and how we do that with one Maori ward and plus the mayor. So 3.3a. Councillor Jennings.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, in terms of this next step, whether it would be preferable to take an option by option, well, take an option approach. So it was going to be my intention to move one of the options that is within the paper, and I think that may be a more confined way of preferable way of dealing with those items, because there may be decisions that are made that make some of those decisions incompatible, potentially.
So, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, on the money, Councillor Jennings, we would like you to pick an option, and that answers most of our questions that we need answered tonight, as in number of councillors, wards, ward names, boundaries.
Councillor Jennings. So my way of thinking was that if we actually had an option proposed by someone, that it would start the conversation in terms of where we might end up. So if someone said 1C, then the conversation would then start in terms of that. But if we go through and vote on each option...
That's exactly we're having a meeting of the minds here, and yes. What I was proposing to do was to move option 2G for discussion and debate.
So I'll come back in that case and to Councillor Bishop.
Are you putting that forward?
So, okay.
Well, if I could join the meeting and second that.
For those councillors that are not aware of what 2G is, that was a paper that was distributed earlier today. Hard copy is on your desk at your seat this afternoon. So option 2G has 8 general councillors, 3 general ward structure, single Maori ward with 1 member, and boundary alterations east between Levin and Waipahu wards and between Kerikeri and Waipahu wards, and combining Miranui and Kerikeri into a single ward. So the number of councillors per ward would be Kerikeri Miranui 2, Levin 4, Waipahu 2, giving a total general number of councillors 8 plus 1 Maori ward with a total of 9 councillors. Plus a mayor, yeah. So that would give 10 around the table. So Councillor Jennings is recommending that 2G, and Councillor Bishop is seconding that proposal. Councillor Jennings, you wish to... certainly,
just as this is not on the order paper, how does it work? Does it need to be... No? It's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. It's because we're actually only making a preferred...
Well, I could move option 2F with some amendments, but for convenience.
Yeah. I did ask that question earlier. It's quite right.
Yeah, look, I'll speak briefly to this motion. I guess I think we're all sitting here a little bit awkward around this conversation, a little bit like the remuneration paper earlier in the evening. But for some legislation telling us that we have to make this decision, we would clearly have a conflict of interest, I think, in many cases. So, look, why I'm moving this as an option is I believe it is the fairest and most compliant of all the options that are in the order paper. The highlights, I guess, of this option is yes, there is a reduction of one councillor overall across the district, in practice that means that a combined Kerikeri and Miranui ward would have one fewer councillor, as would Levin have one fewer councillor. But I believe, as I say, that this, in terms of the numbers and the communities of interest, the boundaries, I believe, are fair and reasonable. I believe it's entirely appropriate for Levin and Waipehu ward to have a negative deviation, and that is to ensure that some of those things that we've discussed about are ultimately future-proofed. And I do want to just bring up the previous representation review where there was discussion about the deviation over 10 in the Kerikeri ward, and I think the comment was made that over time with growth that would correct itself. Unfortunately, the growth in other parts of the district has meant that hasn't played out, and in fact the deviation I think is worse than it previously was. As I say, I believe that this is an appropriate response to where we find ourselves post the decision around a Māori ward. The reality is that we've got a pretty stark choice. It's either this with one fewer councillor, or to ensure a significant amount of fairness and compliance, it's lots more councillors, potentially more than 12 or 13. So for that reason, I commend this option for debate and discussion.
Councillor Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo those sentiments also, just to add a couple of things, and agree that the growth which is significant in the southern parts of the district, which is putting more pressure on that balance or that 10%, I don't think it's going to correct itself over this next period of growth either, as it did last time. And also, as I alluded to earlier, I don't think with the role that council will play into the future that we need to go and add a number of more seats around this table, and also to temper that with the fact that any perceived lessening of representation in the Kerikeri Miranui area is somewhat balanced out by the fact of the elected members on the Foxton Community Board who have an additional level of representation available to that community. So I'm fully in support of this option.
Councillor Browning.
This might be of some, as per previous conversations, might be of some surprise to councillors that I begrudgingly actually support this option, and reason being because, like I said, my view is that we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. There's been no change in criteria in terms of how we can look at our representation. It's purely on population. It doesn't consider geographical spread. It doesn't consider dynamics of a northern ward that geographically is of a bigger spread than perhaps the southern ward. It just focuses on population, and to me, there's an absolute weakness there that hopefully will get looked at some stage. So while I begrudgingly accept and thank Councillor Jennings for his work, because it does, in the context of what we're dealing with, it makes sense, and I agree with Councillor Bishop, in terms of I just cannot see 13 people, the need for 13 people to sit around this table, given the compact district that we are, and the things that are in front of us. On the corresponding side, I have concerns that this lower number of councillors, and that's to be fair, it's only one. But we have some major stuff in front of us in terms of the three waters, the local government reforms and the housing stuff and everything. So it's going to mean increased workloads for councillors. I think as we've seen from some of us that were on council before 2013, when I got on, into what the workloads are today, is just comparing apples to lemons. It's just increased tenfold. So this will, the concern is this will make that even higher. Yes, the remuneration will come up somewhat, but it's still hours that are required to balance people's lives, and that's going to have an impact on councillors around this table. That I have no doubt. And bearing in mind this is certainly going for consultation, so I'll be really interested to see the feedback from the communities that I mainly work in, obviously up in Kiri, and to an extent Muranui because of the boundaries there. Because Muranui, you could argue, will actually gain 100% access to an extra councillor. So they're going to get two councillors to choose from, perhaps from one. Kiri, you could argue, will drop, and it's going to be really interesting to see the feedback from the public on that. If it's a combined ward, which I do also support. The likes of Tokomaru Opiki, does that give them access to better representation? You can argue, yes, it will. So there's a whole lot of dynamics here that I'm happy to go to the community, ask those questions, and come back with an informed decision. So for those reasons, I will support 2G.
Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I also will be supporting 2G for all the reasons that Councillor Brannigan, Bishop and Jennings have put forward. I think being here over the last 18 months and having the 10 councillors and the mayor, I think to add to that is in my view, crazy. I think, although definitely not perfect, and it's extremely hard for us, we've got to make these decisions when it affects us. It's all. So I think it's been a very hard process for everyone, but at the same time, I think the numbers work out the best as far as the percentages go with the population and the other rules they're setting. So if you're going purely on numbers, this is the right option, and I think going forward, this is going to be the best situation we can be put in for our community. So I will be supporting 2G.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. I came to the meeting thinking that I was going to be supporting option 1B. My head tells me that this option 2G is probably the solution that ticks all the boxes. I am concerned that maybe Muranui people will feel that they will be on the outer just because the population base is really in the Kiri ward. I'm hoping that that's not the case. I hope that the best candidates come forward and they represent the whole district. I don't want to see 13 people around the table if possible, especially with it looking like it is with the three waters, and the basically what we have to deal with is going to diminish in the future, even though it's horrendous at the moment. So I am grudgingly and surprisingly supporting 2G also.
Councillor Kelly.
Tēnā koutou. Kare ai e whakaetia nei kaupapa. E hea ai. Ko te take ki a mātou. Ki tō tātou tangata o Muranui, Kere, e take te tino kaupapa o tēnei, representation ki tō tātou iwi Māori. Tērā te tino kaupapa ki ahau. E take tuarua, kare mātou ngā kaunihere kōrero atu ki te iwi, e pāne ki te kaupapa tēnei. Kare ngā kōrero, kare ngā wānanga, e pāne ki te kaupapa tēnei. Take tuarua, kare kai whakaai ki te G, G, tēnā wata. Ai. No te mea, pē ngā te tangata kaunere e kei ta ngaro o tātou, o Miranui, te tino kaupapa. E tino kare au e whakaai e tēnei take hei mua i a tātou. Kei te haramai au ki te tautoko te option B1, is it? 1B. Tērā tā kaupapa ki a au. Kare mātou, te iwi Māori, e kōrero atu ki tō tātou kaunere, a pāne ki te tau e ripoata e tēnei whare. Kia ora.
Councillor.
I'm in the delightful position of offering an alternative view. And I want to address my remarks under the heading of what effective representation looks like. What does effective representation look like? My concern is that we want the highest calibre of candidate to stand for our local authority. We want this to be a game where people can put their hands up, people with real skill, real ability, put their hands up to do the job. My concern about 2G is that when you look at the current and the projected workload for councillors, a point made by Councillor Brannigan, when you look at that workload, and these candidates will be looking at busy but very capable people who maybe want to serve on council, they will look at the job involved and they will look at the number of councillors who will be sharing that workload. And I wonder if 2G would be a deterrent to them. That's the first point I guess I want to make. The second point is this. I want to err on the side of too many rather than too few, because Councillor Jennings and others are absolutely right. We have a terrible choice to make. 9 is arguably too few, 12, 13, whatever looks ridiculous. I accept that. So where should our default position be? Should we be possibly underrepresented, or should we be possibly overrepresented? I'm one of those people who believes totally in this idea of localism, and localism is about making sure that we as a council, as elected members, connect as closely as we can with our community so that that community feels engaged in the decision-making process. So in real terms, what would 2G look like? And I give the example of the proposed amalgamation of Kirikiri and Miranui ward with 2 councillors. A real risk, as was identified, I think, by Councillor Mitchell, is that Miranui will not have a councillor from their midst. Now, that's not to say that they won't be well served by councillors from another part of the area, but they have had a history of having that local voice. This quite possibly, if not probably, will take that voice from them. In addition to that, when you look at the ratio, when you look at the population per councillor, And if you look at the Māori ward, for example, so we'll have a new fresh face. We'll have someone, not necessarily fresh, but we'll have a new face representing a Māori ward with a population of 560, and they'll hit the ground for the first time with that population. And when you look at it as experienced councillors at the ratio that we have been working under, that is a big step up into a new world with what may well be a new kaupapa for that elected member. So this is about effective representation. How do we do it? We will lose 2 general ward councillors, not 1. As someone, I've forgotten who said we'll lose 1 councillor. It's actually 2 general ward councillors that we'll lose. We'll pick up a Māori ward councillor. And I just finish by, and it's a point of detail, but I have to challenge Councillor Bishop, who said that, look, the Kirikiri Miranui combined ward, but they have, at least in the Kirikiri ward, the additional representation through the Foxton Community Board. Apples and oranges. The Foxton Community Board is not about the council table. It is an advocacy group whose job is simply to advocate for that community it serves, like a progressive association or whatever. I know it's a different deal, it is funded, it has those things, but the role is still that of advocacy for that district, not to put the hand on the Bible or whatever and to act for the district as a whole, as a councillor does. So the board to me is a red herring, it's irrelevant. So I just finish by saying this. For me, let's anchor the argument on what effective representation looks like. If we are going to punt for a number, would it be better to risk too few versus too many? And I, for one, want to say, let's actually, if we're going to err on one side or the other, let's actually over-represent our communities rather than under-represent them by going for the option of 12, rather than 9.
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Thank you, Mayor Bernie. It's always going to be an interesting debate, and preface this by saying when we stand for councillors, it's the biggest, most public job interview for many of us that we can have, and then we get to the table and we get to have the conversation about what our job looks like into the future and whether they'll be the same, more or less. But what we're doing today primarily is sending a signal to our communities and asking for their opinion on a preferred option, be it one that we absolutely embrace or be it one that has been noted as being begrudgingly chosen because of the pragmatics of what is potentially in front of us. And when I was thinking about this, I was reminded by Mr. Griffin that this is entirely about considering representation for Māori, and that's something that we've all committed to unanimously, is looking at how that will be embedded into our council going forward, and we are committed to that. And I think about our growth, and I think about fair representation, and I think about the confidence our community would have in us as councillors going forward. So what we're proposing today with 2G, and I am going to say that I do support this going out for consultation, is giving our community a chance to give us feedback, and for those communities of interest, such as Tokomara and Okapiki, to actually come forward and tell us, is this right, is this wrong? And I think that is entirely what we're asking them to do. And I think there is change afoot. There definitely is change afoot. Three Waters reform, RMA reforms, all of those things that are changing, and a refocusing of council, and representation will look different into the future. And we are moving into a period of change, and I think we are moving into, I guess, a much more professionalism of being an elected member and a career focus. It's not something, as we've heard said today, that you can easily add on to other roles anymore. It requires quite a lot of focus. So I've had my mind changed by the conversation today, and I do support that we go out and ask our community to comment on the option of 2G, knowing that they will be fully appraised of the what else has been considered as part of that process. But yeah, and it's by no means final. We do get to consider that feedback as we make the decision, but I support going out and asking for that feedback, and therefore I do support option 2G.
Robert, I know you've got your light on, but you have spoken to this matter. Do you?
Oh yes. I thought I'd better translate what I said.
Okay.
So everyone understood what I said? Would I? Yes, I'd like to. Yeah. Basically, I outlined that I don't agree with the option that's has been motioned to the table, and I've got lots of reasons, but I had highlighted the three of those reasons. The first reason was that the people that came to our table to speak to whether we were going to have Māori wards or not, from what I understand is that they haven't been informed about this discussion. That's number one. The second one was that the council, possibly the Shannon community, will lose a voice, which, as other councillors have said, and I just know that if we lose a council voice, and in the Miranui ward, it will make it even harder for our people to be able to have their say. I've been advocating on behalf of our community is to have a collective voice, and I've spoken to the leaders around Shannon and Tokomari, and they do want their voice to be heard because they feel that their voice is not heard right now. And even though in Shannon it's a lot better, but there are things that I know that still need to get better at. And the other, I also said in my kōrero was that I was actually coming here to vote for 1B, and that's where I stand at the moment. So so I thought I'd better just let you know what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Tukapua.
So I'm looking at my 2G. Oh, there it is. Okay. I guess if this was to go through, it is a preferred option for people like the Miranui community to come tell us actually no. But in light of the recent boundary change, Tokomaru or Piki going off to Palmerston North, surely that's not signal enough that they weren't satisfied with their outcomes or representation or a number of things why they'd want to move in the first place. Didn't feel served well, and if they end up with a merged ward and the likelihood of not having that voice, it's even more so reinforces that. And in the workshop, I might add, I did say or suggest a merged community board of that area. Now, if that were the case, then this might be okay because, of those 5 members, 2 could be Miranui, 3 could be Kiakiri. anyway, that's not before us, but I'd swallow this better if it was. Now, Levin going from 5 to 4, when in total there'll be 10 members with a mayor district-wide. So of 10, 4 in Levin, yet Levin pays 47% of the rates. Now our income's 48 million and Levin pays 22.5 of that. Now, ideally, if you're paying half, you should get half the voice, maybe. So that doesn't work out. I know we're talking about numbers, and yet Waipihu, clearly they're a growth area which I wouldn't reduce and keep them at 2. Now, when we're talking about the Māori ward, I can't see how one person could seriously do a good job. And I'm not talking about numbers. If you understood the dynamics of Māori, I mean, officers would know working with iwi alone is quite challenging. You've got the 2 iwi raukaua Muaupoko here, and then you've got the neighbouring ones, which have statutory, interests and obligations here. And then you've got 12 marae. You've got one person going around, so we can't even visit 12 marae, all of us, collectively in 1 year. You're asking one person to do that. And then the ecosystem is massive. Huge. I mean, I could rattle it off, but we'll be here all night. And then if we think of the meeting we just came from, O2NL, and that's supposed to be priority for us, and we want to see that be successful, you would know that getting that, aligning Māori with what we want to see happen would be beneficial with 2 people in that space. But, I mean, that's just the surface of it. 5,000, what do you do? But I just, too few, too many. Unfortunately, we can't get in the middle there. Without some of that I've just fleshed out, though, people will get an opportunity to come back. I won't be supporting 2G.
Councillor Kasem.
Like Councillor Mitchell and Ketter, I sort of came today too in support of 1B. And the reason I don't support 2G is around the amalgamation of Kirikiri and Mitanui Ward. That's one reason. I actually just don't think that's fair on Mitanui at all. And I did hear what Councillor Allen said when we were talking about Foxton Community Board, but the reality is there are 7 people that Foxton community can go to when they need advocacy at this table. They may not have voting rights, but that's still 7 people in a community that are able to access people when needed. And I just think by watering down the number to 9, as Pity pointed out, Councillor Tukapua, we struggle with some of the stuff we do now with 11 of us. She made a fair point there. And by having extra numbers, I don't see that as being a hindrance, but that is a really good opportunity for having a far more diverse group of people at this table than 9. So I'm not supporting 2G. Sorry, just to add, the Māori ward that we all agreed to support, I feel that by having 1 councillor is setting them up for failure, so I'm not supporting that.
Okay, so everyone has had a voice, and from my point of view, I better state my position on this as well. As you know, I did state at the workshop that I believe that 13 was too many, and I have not changed my view on that. I do believe for effective representation, that doesn't provide it. 13 around this table to me would be cumbersome and would be, I believe, for the size of our district, not the right number. I do have some reservations around the fact that, while we've had this term going on, we've had councillors who have had extended health leave and also maternity leave, which has reduced the number in terms of meeting attendance. So there is some reservations around that. But like the rest of the views, in terms of providing an opportunity for the community to tell us whether they believe what we are as their preferred option is right or wrong, we are giving them that opportunity by making something that is quite different from what we have at the moment. So if it doesn't engage and doesn't promote them to actually come forth with their opinions, then I'm sure that we will listen to them when they do come. So I will be supporting 2G. So the motion is, I'm just Councillor Jennings the right of reply if he wishes to.
Yeah, and I'll be really quick.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank all councillors for the spirited debate and discussion. And look, I think there is it's really useful to hear that feedback. And I think based on the commentary today, I think we do have to just reflect on the fact that this is just putting a preferred option out there for consultation. And if there is a complete allergic reaction to it, then obviously we need to be willing and we're able to revisit that and go in a different direction. In my experience, people do generally like less politicians, than more. But if we've got that wrong, then obviously we can revisit that, as I say. I do just want to say that in terms of an average number of population per councillor, that these numbers are not out of step with other councils that I've looked at. And I think the other thing to reflect on is that even though a councillor is elected in a particular ward, obviously there is a requirement for that person to then represent the district as a whole. And I've actually reflected on a challenge that Councillor Brannigan put to us all during the workshop, that to truly walk the talk and actually do that. And if that means involving yourself in a Foxton Community Board meeting or going along to a community board meeting or community meeting up in Tukumara or Opiki, then that's truly how we're going to be representative as a whole. I did want to just respond to Councillor Tukupua's points about the community board for Miranui. Certainly open to that as an idea, and I think ultimately that's for the Miranui or settlements within the Miranui district, a ward to come forward and indicate whether that's something that they would like to explore, but certainly willing to indicate that I see that as being complementary to this option. And I think the last thing I'll just say is that if the feedback we get is supportive of this option and it's implemented for the next election and following election, if ultimately we determine that we've got it wrong and it's not working, there is the opportunity to do a further representation review earlier, so within the next 3 years. So I think that we should also just reflect on that this isn't locking us in necessarily for 2 election cycles. There is that opportunity to revisit it earlier if we need to.
Thank you. So the motion 3.3 is that the Horowhenua District Council adopts as its initial proposal for the representation review for the local body election to be held in 2022 and subsequent elections until altered by a subsequent decision is A, that the council comprises 8 general ward councillors elected from 3 general wards, 1 Maori ward councillor elected from 1 Maori ward, and the mayor elected at large. So the motion has been put by Councillor Jennings. Is that, and seconded by Councillor Bishop. I'll just call initially for those that are for. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion's carried. Thank you. So then we move to 3.3b, that the council retains the existing general, no, so we won't say retains, that the council has, sorry Darryl, have you got a suggestion there, have you?
The B should be now that the council general ward names be Kerikeri/Miranui, Levin and Waipehu, and the proposed name for the Maori ward be you have to come up with a name. Now, in the meantime, what I'm saying there is that Kiri / Miranui would be a placeholder, because the people could submit on the name, as would the Maori ward name be a placeholder, so that it goes out for submission.
And the suggestion would be we call it Horowhenua, just as a placeholder.
Horowhenua.
Just Horowhenua.
So 3.3b reads that the council has the general ward names of Kiri / Miranui, Levin and Waiapehu, and the proposed name for the Maori ward be Horowhenua. As Darryl's indicated, these are just placeholder names at this stage. Obviously, consultation may change that. So do I have a mover and a seconder for those? Councillor Jennings, seconded Councillor Bishop. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So, does 2G alter the boundaries of the wards?
Yes, it does, Mr. Mayor.
It does.
Yeah, so 3.3c will read that the proposed boundaries of the 3 general wards be altered and be as shown on the map, option 2G, and that the Maori ward be district-wide.
Moved Councillor Jennings, seconded Councillor Bishop. Everyone understand the recommendation? Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Keru. Councillor Kay Simmons. Thank you. 3.3, so the motion's carried, sorry. 3.3d, that the population for each ward will be represented as follows, which is essentially what the paper says in front of us, and I can't read the screen. Oh, here it is. I've got it here. So for the Kiri Miranui ward, it is 8,170. Levin is 15,461. Waiapehu 7,389. A total general of 31,020. The Maori ward being 5,060, with a total of 36,080. And the rest of that table obviously is then flows through with the number of councillors per ward, 2, 4, 2 and 1. Councillor Jennings is happy to move that. Councillor Bishop is happy to second that. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Keru? Carried. Thank you. So we don't need 3.4 because all of the ward deviations percentage-wise now fit within the 10%. Is that correct?
You don't need to have any. I mean, you could comment that it's so the public are aware that it complies with the fair representation requirements.
Right. So that will be part of the proposal anyway, won't it? Yes. Okay. So we now move to 3.5, which is the Horowhenua District Council retains the Foxton Community Board. Further, that the name of the board be altered to Te Auho Foxton Community Board, that the Foxton Community Board comprises 5 members elected at large, and we are adding the following words, and 2 appointed members being the elected councillors for the Kiri / Miranui ward and or the Maori ward representatives. And 3.5c, that the proposed boundaries of the ward remain 1, as they are at present, as shown on map A, or 2, be extended as proposed, as on the map B. So could I have someone to move in that respect in terms of that 3.5A through to C, and with stating whether they prefer the map to be changed or not, or the boundary to be changed or not. Councillor Allen.
I think we probably need to break it up with respect, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move A for a start, but I've got some thoughts about a couple of the others, but I'm happy to move A.
So that's been seconded by Councillor Brannigan. So 3.5A, that the name of the board be altered to Te Awaho Foxton Community Board.
So just for clarity, Mr. Mayor, as I understand it, it's now a debate as to whether we retain the board. That's an important point, because that's the lead-in statement. And then the second point is about what the board is named. So I support I'm not going to make a big speech about it, I support the continuation of the Foxton Community Board, and I note and support the board's wish that the name be altered to reflect the Māori Pākehā partnership through the name of Te Awaho Foxton Community Board.
That the Horowhenua District Council retains the Foxton Community Board, and that the name of the board be altered to Te Awaho Foxton Community Board. Sure, that's okay. So moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Brannigan. Any further discussion? Put Councillor Kay Simmons, you going to speak?
Yeah, so once again I wasn't at the discussion previously, but so I only sort of read this when I got it basically sent. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not in favour of retaining the Foxton Community Board, but I guess it's up to the consultation process, go out to the public, but yeah, we had this, sorry? Oh, it won't be. Yeah, I'm just, from the past discussion we had a few years ago as well, I'm not happy with retaining it, so I just want that known.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Kay Simmons is against. Thank you. So moving on to 3.5B, that the Foxton Community Board comprises 5 members elected at large. No, we're doing these individual, plus 2 members appointed by council representing the Kirikiri Maranui ward and or the Horowhenua ward. Councillor Allen?
So speaking to that, I think we need to be more precise around the wording there. And my preference is that the wording be 2 members appointed by council, one being a member from the general ward of Kirikiri Maranui, and the second being the Māori ward councillor. And if there's a seconder, I'll speak to it.
So you're saying take out the and or?
Yeah, I'm identifying there are 2 members. There are 3 councillors at the moment. There's the Māori ward councillor, the ward is the whole district, and then there are the 2 general ward councillors from the Maranui Kirikiri ward. So there are 3 councillors potentially. I'm suggesting there be 2 only, and during our workshop I think there was general support. I could be wrong, I think there was general support, make it 2. But the intent of what I'm recommending is to recognise, again, it's a partnership thing, that the representative for the Māori ward be on the Foxton Community Board, and that one of the 2 councillors from the general ward be the second councillor on the Foxton Community Board. Now there's options within that, there's the 18 months sharing arrangement or whatever, but we have done that before in a different regime where in fact there were 2 councillors. And one only was supported by the Commission, and only one was appointed to the Community Board. Subsequently repealed, made damn good sense at the time, but that's another story. So that's what I'm putting on the table for discussion.
Just for clarity, Ken, so that you're saying that the Foxton Community Board comprises 5 members elected at large, plus one appointed member from the Kerikeri Muranui ward and the Maori ward representative. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jennings. If you remember.
I don't know, that's a motion on the table. I just want to offer another alternative. Given we're talking about representation and we're talking about district-wide representation, does it have to be specifically that it is a General Ward Foxton elected member, or could it be from the General Ward elected a ward of council, that if there was somebody from the Waipahu ward or the Live-In ward that expressed an interest, what is the requirement in terms of a broader representation for that Foxton ward, Foxton Community Board?
The appointments have to be for members elected from the wards in which ward, or wards, in this case it's wards plural, in which the Foxton Community Board is situated. So it has to be from either the Muranui Kerikeri combined ward or the Māori ward.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, listen, I support Councillor Allen's motion. One councillor from the Kerikeri Muranui ward on the community board. I think workload is definitely an issue. That combined ward is going to go down to 2 councillors. And I did read somewhere in the notes, workshop notes or this report, somewhere along the line where it said something like the councillors at the Kerikeri ward are supported by the community board. My view and experiences of the last 9 years actually works the opposite. The workload is actually higher because of the interactions with the community board, which is a positive thing. It's not a negative, it's a positive thing. We attend huge amount of community board meetings, workshops, all kinds of community board activities. So this doesn't work where it lightens your workload, it actually contributes to your workload. So for that reason, I support just the one councillor in the Maori Ward Council.
Councillor.
Thank you. My recollection from the workshop was that was suggested, but as Councillor Tukapua has pointed out, one Maori representative has got an awful lot of ground to cover, and this is basically locking them into having to go to the community board meeting. Are they also going to have to go to the Waitarere Progressive, the Manukau, the Shannon, the Tokomaru? It's one person, and personally I'd rather see that 2 people were appointed, and it could be a Maori representative and a general, or it could be 2 general. It's basically locking in and saying they have to go, and we don't have them here yet to even have a voice.
So I agree with you actually, Councillor Mitchell. And in terms of, though, the initial proposal that we're going out for consultation with, this is obviously going to be one of those things that, although if I just need to clarify, because we are retaining the Foxton Community Board, are we still consulting on the makeup of that board and how it operates? Jennings.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might just actually ask a clarifying question, I think, to Sue and Darryl, which is around, given the comments about the potential scope or the potential workload of a Māori ward councillor, I just wanted to understand that there is scope for the next council to determine, when it's setting the remuneration arrangements, for a different remuneration level to be set for the Māori ward councillor to reflect perhaps a larger workload or more scope of activities. Is that correct? Am I correct in understanding that?
Councillor Robert, would you mind tuning your thing? Thank you.
What we know at the moment is that positions with responsibility are remunerated higher. So at the moment we remunerate the chair of our committees and deputy chair. We would have to check what the positions of responsibility, exactly what they include, if it does include extra workload. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Through the chair, could I please make a comment on the recommendation that you're looking at now? Part of the reason why we put in the recommendation any 2 members was so that, be appointed by council, was so that the decision could be made later after councillors, after the election, which is when the council will appoint the 2 extra members to the Foxton Community Board. So just a little steer on that. That's the reason why we had any 2.
Robert, if you wish to speak now. Yep, thank you.
As I said earlier, te tino kaupapa o tātou, a kaupapa the election of Māori wards or inclusion of Māori wards. As Councillor Piriira has mentioned, the ecosystem of the dynamics of iwi Māori are huge. And just one councillor is not going to be enough. So I'm going to be voted against this part.
Through you, I'm actually going to provide some guidance on this as well. I think care has to be taken on the determination that you're considering around having the Maori ward elected person on the community board without consulting with Maori in that area before we actually go out with the proposal. I think you might get yourself, and I think you have to have the discussion first. That is my strong advice to you. So there's no reason why you can't actually say that there's 2 elected members, 2 and or, but I think it's really important that you consult with iwi in that area first before you make the determination or the proposal to actually have it included in the proposal. That would be my strong advice to you.
Councillor Tukapua.
Just a question of clarification. Now that we're going out with 2G, is there still an opportunity for, say, existing Miranui to say, well, okay, can we have a community board in that next phase? Or do we signal it now? No, just wait. Okay.
So, Councillor Allen, in terms of the advice received from the Chief Executive, are you wanting to alter anything in your recommendation?
Yeah, so look, just by terms of right to reply, this is driven by the partnership idea. Look, I understand totally the implications for the person concerned. I like the idea of showing some flexibility about how we support them in coping with that. But the message I got from the community board, and certainly the message that I took from the very packed gallery, was that they want to engage with council. Council has only one community board. As to the CEO's point, and I hear the strength of his advice, which he is giving very strongly, on a rare occasion where I do disagree. And I do so because of the discussion we've had all evening about this being us saying this is where we feel things should be. We absolutely go without predetermination and we'll hear the feedback. But it's an invitation to this new look council and this new look potentially community board to put it on the table that this is how we see the board working in the future in terms of partnership. And I think that's a very useful and transparent way to start a discussion. So I stand by my original.
I'll just add one rider, if I could. The people that we actually had here were supporting a Maori ward councillor, not a Maori community board member. And there is a difference. And I still think you need to have that discussion.
Okay, so Councillor Allen's got a recommendation on the table. It's been seconded by Councillor Jennings. Okay, so we need to vote on that recommendation. All right, so the recommendation from Councillor Allen is that the Foxton Community Board comprises 5 members elected at large and 2 members appointed by the council, one representing the Kerikeri Miranui ward and the other being the Horowhenua ward councillor. So you've heard the discussion. I'll put the vote. All those in favour? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against. So the motion is lost. So
I thought, can we leave it open? Can we leave it open? Do we have to settle on a? So that was not successful. Can we just leave it open?
no, we need to have a preferred option.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, I'll then move motion of one ward councillor.
So okay, so your next recommendation is moving that the Foxton Community Board comprises 5 members elected at large and
1 Kerikeri Miranui ward councillor.
1 member appointed by council representing the Kerikeri Miranui ward, and
Just that, no, that's it.
at full stop.
That's it.
Seconded by Councillor Allen.
It's worked before. Yeah, sorry. And the reason I say that is, in the previous term we had 1 ward councillor on the community board. It worked well. It did have a good balance. I was not the councillor on the community board, but when I did want to speak to the community board, I got speaking rights. Went and advocated through that one, and it worked well. So I'll see this as no different.
So it looks like we're just checking. Sorry? So the motion put forward by Councillor Brannigan is that the Foxton Community Board comprises the 5 members elected at large and 1 member appointed by council representing the Kerikeri Miranui ward. It's been seconded by Councillor Allen.
Happy to support that.
Well, I just need to make sure that we're following process correctly, otherwise.
Yeah. Cheers. I don't think it's chair.
Are you asking a question? People must need something to eat, don't they? They can probably eat grains, don't they?
Councillor Isaacs.
Just out of curiosity, so if you went with that motion, is it possible to put 1 or 2 elected members, because that'll be up to the new council. That gives them the option, if the new Mary Ward councillor wanted to be part of it, you would then have the option of putting 2 on there, or only 1 if required. That would just give you more flexibility, wouldn't it? Or more confusion. You did right, yeah.
Unfortunately, the legislation doesn't give you that flexibility. You need to decide as part of your review the number of people who will be appointed to the board. What you can do, of course, is, as with any other part of the review, if the community challenges that and you decide in the final proposal that you want to change it, you can.
Councillor Mitchell.
So just clarifying that as that reads, it means that the Maori ward representative is not able to sit on the Foxton Community Board, even though that person may represent people, because they're elected by the Maori community, some of whom live in the Foxton community area. So should it not read or the Horowhenua ward?
Possibly, but I think just right at the moment, again, it's my boss, I think you need to engage with Evie on this before you actually determine what it might be.
Yeah.
And if there is an alteration that comes through during the consultation phase, so yeah, we can actually put that in. But I think it's really important to actually engage with Iwi in the Kirikiri Miranui area just for the moment, before we actually put that proposal. So it can still be done. And we're just going to get clarification on how Maori representation could still be availed for the Foxton Community Board. And it could be by the elected member, but there may be another means of actually having that representation, and it's more around representation for the area versus the district, which is my concern right at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Keru, Councillor Kay Simmons. Thank you, the motion's passed. Right, 3.5C, that the proposed boundaries of the board be either 1 or 2, shown map A or map B. Councillor Allen?
I move A, the status quo. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Yep, A.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Mason.
And
Councillor Allen?
just speaking to it, it's too early to look at B. We have had an update about some good work the board's been doing connecting, but we really need that to come through the consultation process. We can't adopt what is just tabled tonight as our preferred position, I believe.
I'd concur with that, actually, as well. Anyone else wish to speak to that?
Just on that, I think it comes back to the last motion, which was the number of councillors in the community board. I would expect the Foxton Community Board to thoroughly submit to this process, outline their reasons for the boundary, the reasons for whether they support one councillor or 2 on the community board, to guide us when it comes to making that final decision. So, yeah, for that reason, support that as well.
Thank you. So the motion is put. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Keru, Councillor Kay Simmons. Thank you. Our last two recommendations are 3.6 and 3.7. The initial proposal is prepared and public notice be given of the proposals as adopted, and 3.7, the Horowhenua District Council will hear submissions on the proposal. Councillor Allen is prepared to move that.
Question, if you don't mind.
Question, yes?
Yeah, a question, a comment actually. Question to the CEO. Just in relation to the preparation of this as a document or notice that goes out to the public, I wanted to understand if there is scope to ask some related questions that could help us with perhaps some future decision making. And so a question, for example, that was raised around, Councillor Tukapua raised around the Miranui Community Board. Could we pose a question, in theory, through the documentation that we prepare, that puts that as a question? What's your appetite for? Do you support? A question along those lines. And also, I was looking at potentially the possibility of including a question around the community's appetite for us to investigate or explore future amalgamation, in a local authority sense, and whether there's actually that, to sort of, I guess, ascertain whether there's any sort of support for that as a potential work stream going forward, because this would obviously seem to be the best opportunity to pose those related questions, even though they're not required to form part of the notice. I just wanted to understand if that's a possibility, and I could put forward a proposal on the second if it is.
In short, yes. So in the summary document that is being drafted at the moment, we could have the initial proposal here that you're consulting on, but we could ask questions over here that are outside of the initial proposal.
Sorry, can I follow up question to the CEO? Do you think we need a formal resolution to identify some potential questions to, I guess, gauge support, whether there's support to do that, or could that be taken as a separate discussion?
Chair to determine how much time it might take to actually do that, but I would probably, my advice maybe would be is to get those ideas back to us in terms of what could be those things that could be raised separately to the proposal, and before we circulate the proposal, because there's a bit of work to do in terms of the documentation and that, we can actually have that shared with the councillors just to make sure everyone's comfortable with the path that we're in, and then we can sort of take it from there.
I'd be reluctant to make those choices and those questions right now without some thought being given by individual councillors to understand some of the background that might be needed in terms, there's some big issues there in terms of amalgamation and other issues that could be. I wouldn't like to have that conversation immediately without understanding some of the information and data behind it.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a second comment that I foreshadowed was just in relation to 3.6 that it talks about preparing a public notice. I just wanted to understand the channels that we're proposing to use to put this proposal out there, because certainly one of the some feedback that Councillor Kay Simmons and I have had from Grey Power meetings in the past is that the communication channels that we're using aren't always reaching a certain demographic. And so the particular feedback was that, for example, using the Chronicle, Horowhenua Chronicle, to have it as, as the regular, I think it's monthly insert, isn't adequate enough to ensure that we're touching and that we're reaching those people. So I just wanted to, I guess, express that, and then also just make sure that perhaps we need to think about how this proposal is communicated to ensure that we get the greatest extent of participation and understanding as possible.
So I'm happy to note that we've got our communications manager sort of listening to your words. I think she'll take on board and work with Sue in terms of how that proposal will be promoted.
And Grey Power have raised that issue with us, and but struggled to come up with a solution as well, which is challenging.
Actually, well, can I just respond to that? Because Councillor Kay Simmons and I expressed a similar view to Grey Power and sort of put a challenge there, what would the solution look like? And one of the immediate things that they've actually suggested is that obviously the insert that does go into the Chronicle, whether a number of those could be printed as a separate run and strategically located around different locations around the district, whether it's supermarkets, community facilities, that kind of thing, because those are places where those people are visiting and could actually pick that up. So that sort of resonated well with us. So.
Through you, Mayor Bernie, I could just very quickly outline the proposal for consultation, if you like. So there'll be a public notice put on our website on Wednesday next week. That same public notice will go into the Horowhenua Chronicle on Friday. We are planning on hard copy consultation documents as well as extensive social media coverage. There'll be the option of submitting through our website, email, every channel you can think of. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
And I'm talking to Grey Power during the consultation period, so we'll be able to actually hand deliver hard copies of the consultation document there as well.
To be support the kōrero or maybe community boards and things like that. I have had extensive kōrero with the leaders of of my community in Tokomari, and the biggest thing for those leaders is that they're saying that having representation at the council level is really important for them, and because of what they have already been through, like a Tokomari and Opiki, they've felt that they're being left out. So they feel that that's a real good thing that they to actually have some sort of a community board. And just wanted to sort of put that on the table as well.
Kia ora, Robert. Councillor Mitchell.
With reference to consultation, can you please email copies of that press release to all ratepayer groups who can then distribute it onto all their email bases and possibly print it and put it on their notice boards? Because a lot of people don't get the Chronicle.
Thank you all. Thank you, Daryl, for being here today. It's helped a lot, and I know it won't be the last time we probably see you. I'm sure there'll be further times that you'll need to assist us, and we appreciate the help very greatly. Thank you. Oh, did we? Have we not moved it? Oh. Yeah, sorry.
I was just saying.
I thought I closed my book and that was the end of it. Okay, so I'll move that 3.6 and 3. It's been moved here by Councillor Allen and seconded. Seconded by myself. Okay, put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Reiterate those comments, Daryl. Thank you. And thank you, councillors, for your engagement and discussion and debate around this issue. As I've often said, the easy decision was saying that we wanted a Maori ward. The difficult decision is what we've just gone through, and will continue to challenge us over the next month. Thank you, staff. Thank you, members of the press. Thank you, members of the public, and those that are watching live stream as well, if there's any left. And could I ask Robert, please, to close our meeting? Thank you.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Kei te rongo au ngā kōrero e pāne ki tō take hei mui a tātou. Tēnā koe te rangatira mō tō awhina mai ki a mātou, te karauni hera. Nō reira tēnā koutou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou riki au i ukuraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhingata i tā, i te wairua tapu, ake. Āmene. Thank you.
Good, Robert. Thank you.